Hello and welcome to the Kings of Anglia Ipswich Town podcast, sponsored by Manscaped and Ginger Pickle. Andy Warren and Stuart Watson here on a Friday morning. And there's some news to talk about, Stu. We're going to jump straight in. No nonsense. Ipswich have made another signing. The fourth one of the transfer window is over the line. Massimo Luongo, George Hurst, Nathan Broadhead, and now Harry Clarke in another eye-catching piece of League One business.
Yes, Mark Ashton said on our podcast back in November that he didn't want to be left with any regrets at the end of this window, that he didn't want to leave anything on the table, any stone unturned. Well, he certainly delivered on that promise, hasn't he? Another player that's come from a Premier League club, another player who has spent the first half of this season at a Championship club, and plenty more narrative surrounding him as well, which adds to the excitement.
Yeah, we'll talk about him as a player in a moment. Let's talk about the that narrative to start with. He's born and bred in Ipswich, and he's coming back home. We know he came through the Ipswich Academy, and we know that he's the young man that put the finishing touches to that beautiful viral internet sensation goal in 2014, which has been viewed millions of times online. He was the one that put the final touch in there. But his town career after that didn't last an awful lot longer, and he was off to Arsenal, to bigger and better things. Now he's back, and he looks absolutely delighted to be back.
Yeah, a lot of boxes ticked with this transfer, and the first box ticked is his narrative, his romance, his storyline. We're in the business of telling stories. Ipswich-born player returns to his boyhood club. Yes, please. Thank you very much. We'll lap that up. I love the Macaulay Bond story. I made no secret of that. This is what we love as football fans, isn't it? Players representing their hometown club and maybe going away and taking the long journey, the long road back to where it's begun. He's only 21, of course, but it feels like, a lot has happened for him from the ages of 14 to 21, which we'll recap in a minute. But it's hard not to be excited and have a smile on your face knowing that this is a lad who was born in Ipswich, who has played for the club as a youngster, and has ended up ultimately back here.
Yeah, he's not the only one either at the moment. Obviously, you mentioned Macaulay Bond there, but Luke Wolfenden is still here. He's the Chantry boy who's doing all right for himself. Richard Keogh, we've had that there as well. The former ball boy coming back and playing for his club in the twilight years of his career, which he never thought would happen. And then even Cameron Humphreys, who's obviously been at Ipswich since he was a primary school child and is now a bona fide first team player with a new long-term contract. So for all the kind of the squad that was thrown together by Paul Cook in the summer of what even summer was that? 2021 was that? Yeah, the summer of 2021. It's turned into a squad that's kind of just got so many players to warm to in it, hasn't it? And Clarke is gonna be an instant hit. He's got a little bit of a Suffolk accent as well, hasn't he? He's got a nice little one. I like it.
Yeah, I think there was a fear that maybe with all the money that Ipswich could throw at this now and a very big pool of players they can recruit from, that maybe some of the history and traditions of the club and those local roots might get eroded a little bit. And ultimately, if the team is successful on the pitch, no one really cares about how many homegrown players you have and everything like that. But it certainly adds to this connection between fans and players and just the real feel-good factor and warmth that people are feeling towards this squad, doesn't it? So, you can tell he's pleased to be back. He talked about being home. We'll see how he does from here, won't we?
Yeah, his journey back to here has obviously gone Arsenal. Then the loan route for him after a few trophy games with Arsenal under-21s and worked his way up to the Premier League 2 team, earned a second pro contract as well in there. But then the route from there has been a season at Oldham, half a season at Ross County, another half a season with Hibs, and then another half season after that with Stoke. And he's packed an awful lot in to a sort of a young career, really, isn't he? For a guy that, like you say, is only still 21. But he comes with quite a lot of life experience and a decent amount of footballing experience too. So it's a nice all round package. Again,
Yeah,
I'll say it again, packaged with a nice little Suffolk accent on top.
yeah, you like that, don't you? Next box ticked is character for me. I think that jumps off the page in spades when you see him interviewed. When you look at some of the references from former managers, Harry Clarke, who was his manager at Oldham, talks about what a fantastic attitude he had, first into training, last out, always wanting to self-develop and improve, which is a big part of this kind of school-like culture under Kieran McKenna of everyone, no matter how old you are, wanting to learn and improve and add strings to your bow. He talks really well, doesn't he? I think you did a really good profile piece online this morning where he talks about multiple junctures in his short career so far, wanting to prove people wrong, wanting to prove people I'm quicker than they think, wanting to prove people that he was ready for a League One relegation scrap in his first loan, and people go, well, 18 years old, is he going to be ready for that? By all accounts, he was. So yeah, a real hunger about him at 21 years of age.
Yeah.
You can feel that, can't you?
Yeah, I really like that. It's not even just the it's not even just that desire to prove people wrong. That I love that. I like people who can find a little chip in their own shoulder and use it to fuel them. I like that. I also like when he was meant to be at Hibs for 18 months. So he signed in, I think it was January of last year, signed to Hibs for an 18-month loan. Only did 6 months of it because Arsenal then went and placed him at Stoke instead. But ahead of what was supposed to be the first full season at Hibs, he was kind of taking aim at James Tavernier, the Rangers captain, saying, "Oh, well, I want to be the best right back in the league." He's fueled. He's well fueled, this guy, and it won't have been an easy decision to come back here. So, and I'm sure he's taken an awful long time to think about it, but he'll have done it for all the right reasons, and I really like that.
As much as I think he's excited by being back at Ipswich, you can definitely tell there's a tinge of disappointment that his Arsenal journey's come to an end. He had to stop himself from talking about Arsenal in his club interview because he said he was going to get too emotional about it, and he said it's not quite sunk in yet. There is no doubt in my mind that he thought he was on the road to being an Arsenal first team player, and that, you know, every year he was going to keep improving, being on that journey. I think he'd been involved in training with Mikel Arteta's first team in various pre-seasons at different stages. So when you think you're on that pathway and it stops, that probably takes a little bit to get your head around. But the fact that it is Ipswich and there is a major project, a major ambition here, and he might be able to scratch those ambition itches here, I think will very quickly kind of push down any disappointments that the Arsenal journey's come to an end.
Yeah, I'm sure one step out of the Portman Road tunnel in a stadium, a crowd like the one that was in for the Plymouth game will quickly be that safety net to catch you if you are having any kind of feeling of regret about the Arsenal thing. He'll know, and he'll have had people around him that would have told him that this was a good move for him, a really good time to join the club that can take him upwards again, because he's left Arsenal, which will be big for him. He's also dropped down from the Championship into League One, where he's kind of taken this double drop, but there's enough at Ipswich to pick him up, I think, and get him moving forward again, because he will be. It's not going to take an awful lot on the pitch for him to be absolutely loved, is it? He's onto a winner. He's onto a winner here, and he could be the next cult hero.
He's got vibes of Mark McGuinness in terms of sort of a young lad, but has got a real bit of leadership about him. You know, that sort of vibe to me, in just terms of his character. Also, and I've seen people mention this, almost like a young Luke Chambers. Maybe it's the sort of shaven-headed look that was kind of, if you remember Luke Chambers in his Nottingham Forest days, had that sort of shaven head, and people could tell even when he was very young that he was a kind of a captain in waiting further down the line. He's serious, he's a leader, he's ambitious, but there's a little bit of a glint of fun in his eyes as well. I think he'll be one that will add to sort of the banter in the dressing room from what we've seen of him as well. So yeah, as I say, character, attitude, leadership. They're big boxes ticked, aren't they?
I think him and Luke Wolfenden might have a little bit of fun together. Luke's obviously that little bit older. They'll be aware of each other. Of course they will. I think they might quite enjoy each other's company. Do you reckon?
Yes, yeah, I hadn't considered that, but yeah, the two Suffolk boys might hit it off. We'll see.
We'll see. Right, Harry Clarke as a player. That's the main reason he's here. Because of the player that he is. He left as a midfielder. He'd played higher up the pitch, but he left Ipswich as a midfielder for that compensation fee to Arsenal in 2015. He comes back very much a defender, and he comes back very much a defender who started as a central defender, but now very definitely has some right-sided tendencies to his game. So that's where we see him fitting, isn't it? Certainly where I see him fitting.
I think so, yeah. Kieran McKenna, we know Kieran McKenna likes versatility and adaptability in his players. We know he likes athleticism, and Clarke certainly seems to be that. As you say, he's someone that he talked in his interview about having started out as a striker in the Ipswich Youth Academy. I think we were talking about him being a midfielder around the time he scored that viral goal that you mentioned. He goes to Arsenal. He says, I played virtually every position there for the first year. And then eventually they kind of decided that they were going to focus on him being a centre-half. I think there's a suggestion that he might have even played a bit of left-back when he was up in Scotland, potentially at Ross County. And at Stoke this year, he's kind of landed on right-back and a right wing-back role. So we're not sure exactly where Kieran McKenna will see him fitting in this system, but with everything that we've just suggested and where he's been playing for Stoke recently, does that make him quite well suited for that sort of hybrid right-sided centre-half / right-back role that Janoy Donasian's been playing?
100%. I feel sure that that's what he's here for. I think the versatility will be really useful. Of course, he can play at centre back as well, just like Janoy can. But I think they needed somebody else in that position. It's quite a bespoke position. You need to be something very specific to kind of to play that. And I think Clarke is that. So that's where I see him fitting, definitely.
Yeah, if we're continuing on the box ticked theme, his actual physical attributes, I think, are a major thing here. He looks like someone who's a good size. He looks like a brute. He talks a lot about relishing the physical side of the game, someone who can go and win some headers. He's loves to defend as well as getting forward. And that's probably something that Ipswich have lacked a little bit. You look at some of the goals they've conceded, there's been a theme about high balls to the back post, maybe just someone who's ready to throw their body on the line in these final minutes where Leeds have been let slip at times. I think he's someone that's going to really sort of be able to hit the physical side of League One, hit the ground running in that respect, hopefully.
Yeah, and all the word coming from town is that he's ready to hit the ground running in every respect. Kieran McKenna, in the very brief kind of few lines of quotes as part of the announcement, talking about wanting him involved immediately. He's good to go. So we're sitting here ahead of the Oxford game, and you've got to wonder what his involvement will be in that. I'm sure he'll be with the squad, absolutely be with the squad. It's whether he makes the bench and whether he even makes it straight into the starting 11. You never know.
There's different situations here. Obviously, Hurst and Broadhead didn't start straight away in the Plymouth game. Broadhead because he'd been to and fro from Wales, getting moved, bit of tightness in his muscles, some injury history there, so they don't take any chances with him. George Hurst just hadn't played a great deal of football, certainly from the start for Blackburn, so maybe wasn't quite ready in terms of match sharpness. Very different with Harry Clarke. He's been starting most weeks for Stoke in recent weeks. He's coming back to an area that he knows. I think his family are still in the area as well, so he's not got any of that sort of settling in stuff off the pitch as much as the other guys. So what do you reckon, Andy?
So what are you saying, Stu? You're trying not to say what I think you're thinking.
I don't know if it will be this game at Oxford, but if it's not, certainly I could see the Morecambe game on Tuesday night. What do you reckon?
Yeah, that's how I'd see it as well. I think I think as much as anything, he won't have. That role is quite a specific role in the team, and it requires a good amount of tactical analysis and sort of positional analysis to go in. I think they'd at least want him to train in it properly a couple of times. So yeah, I would say I'd say make the bench because you can cover the centre half and right side fullback position as a bench player, and then start Tuesday night. A few people have been having a bit of a laugh about the comment that Kieran McKenna made about his new bed, about signings being in a different bed in relation to Nathan Broadhead, which I can see the serious side of that, but it did cause a few smiles. But if he's going back to stay maybe with his mum and dad, it's a bed that he would be used to.
Back in his childhood bedroom.
Back in his childhood bedroom with posters of Luke Chambers on his wall. Yeah, but it was that kind of era, wasn't it? He might have. Luke Chambers would have been someone although he'd been looking up to midfielders, wouldn't he? He wouldn't have cared about centre backs at that point. Who would have it? Teddy Bishop,
Kevin Brew,
yeah,
Luke Hyam,
or some Tabby. Oh,
yeah,
love me,
Johnny Douglas, all the big ones.
Maybe Johnny Williams.
We'll find out when we get to speak to him.
All the big dogs. Yeah, I would say Tuesday night. Absolute. Actually, I'm going to check something very quickly. I was about to say at absolute worst, he would start the FA Cup game with Burnley, but I'm going to check live on the podcast because I haven't checked this stat yet whether he's cup tied or not. You ready for this?
Point. Yeah.
Let's find out.
Drum roll, please.
Do you think he's cup tied? Yes or no?
I'm going to say yes.
He is cup tied. He played in Stoke's 3-0 win at Hartlepool, so he won't be playing against Burnley next weekend.
Well, that probably maximises his chances or increases his chances of playing him in one of, if not both of these next two, doesn't it? Elephant in the room time. What does that mean for other players in the squad? We're talking about him playing in Janoi Danassian's position here, aren't we? What does it mean for Janoi?
I think it means it's got and this is why I don't think he'll start in this first game straight away, because I think it gives Janoi the competition that he needs, because I don't think they had another player that could effectively play that position like Janoi. The obvious thing to think is that Clarke is the long-term starter here, and I think that's probably fair. And I would imagine that when that is, I don't know, that will happen. But I think there'll be a real sense of loyalty to Janoi, because he's given McKenna an awful lot over the last year. And I think he will settle into being a very, very trusted and valued member of the squad who can cover every defensive position, is a proven potential starter in the right-sided role, can play right back, left back, centre back, at very worst for Janoi. I'd see him as a really quite useful and versatile bench defender, and we might end up looking at him in the same way as we look at Greg Lee, potentially.
Possibly. Yeah, he's out of contract. He's out of contract in the summer, but there's no doubting that he's more than earned the trust and respect of everybody with what he's done over the last year, and I'm certain that Ipswich will probably take that option.
Hope so.
And have him as a really valued member of the squad, both on and off the pitch.
What I would say, Stu, lots of people have written off Janoi Danassian before, so one thing I'm not going to do is write him off, because every manager that's been here at Ipswich it's looked like he was going to leave at some point, and he hasn't. He's proved himself to be useful. His attitude is bang on. All the players love him, and he's proven himself with that one key attribute of being a brilliant one-on-one defender, to be extremely useful. So I think
the role he plays is very dynamic. A lot is asked of him, and I think we got almost used to him bombing on and supporting Wes Burns and making underlaps and overlaps and creating the space for Wes Burns. And it was probably natural that at some point he was going to hit a bit of a wall. And there has been times of late where maybe he hasn't. He's just looked a little bit jaded, which is understandable, because he's played I think started virtually every game since McKenna's arrived. So just a little bit of competition, and it won't go amiss for him. We're not suddenly writing him off. We're not saying he's not going to start again. I'm not saying he's definitely out the door in the summer, but I think you said it when we talked about, is there any more positions? You said maybe that sort of right back area was one that they just needed an extra body. The person I do worry more about here is Kane Vincent-Young, who is also out of contract in the summer. He now gets pushed even further to the fringes. Yes, he's versatile. I mean, he ended up replacing Wes Burns late on against Plymouth last weekend, but increasingly difficult to kind of see where he fits into all of this, isn't it?
Yeah, it's given it's incredibly hard to make Ipswich Town's bench right now. Incredibly hard. And versatility is a big plus, a big tick for you if you're able to offer that. And Kane did and does. And I think that's why he's been making benches. But what he doesn't offer is the same kind of robust defensive option that Janoy and Greg Lee do, and Clarke as well. And you're not going to pick him as an attacking player over any of the attacking options, are you? So, yeah, it's difficult to see a route into the team for him from here. As much as I think everybody would still pull for him and want him to do that, it's if you're being honest about it, it's hard to see.
I make it they're up to 25 fit senior first team players now, which we talked about the difficulty in picking the bench for the Plymouth game, and we were miles out on that, by the way. I think most of the calls we made in various bench positions tipped the other way, but 13 players into 6, 13 outfield players into 6 bench options. There's some serious man management that is going to be a test of Kieran McKenna's man management now, and I would imagine that we're talking more about 1 or 2 exits before the window shuts rather than additions, aren't we?
I'm never going to say never with additions. I honestly, it wouldn't shock me if they did make another one. I couldn't tell you where that should be. But yeah, I think the big thing now is exits. I think part of man management also is to facilitate those exits. I think that's a big part of man management as well, to know when the right thing for people is to move somewhere else and place somebody somewhere else. And there are a few obvious ones that are there to discuss. Like, is Kane Vincent-Young somebody that might move on? Maybe. I really hope they sort out a way for Ahadme to get back to Burton, because that makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, we're not writing Ghassan Ahadme's future off at Ipswich Town. It's not even got off the ground yet. That foot fracture obviously has meant for a bit of a false start for him, but there's no minutes really between now and the end of the season for him, is there, with Hurst and Broadhead in the building. So it makes sense for him to just get himself back up to speed, and the only club he can go to is Burton. I know the Burton manager talked about they've had a discussion, but financially it doesn't look viable. I would hope Ipswich, it's not like Ipswich are counting the pennies, they can come to a sensible solution where he can go back and just play some football, and then hopefully come back and push again in the summer. He's still young, and they've signed him for a reason. Another player that I would say is in a bit of a danger zone at the moment is Kyle Edwards. He's another one that's just got pushed a bit further to the fringes with the players that have come in.
Yeah. I wonder. I don't know about, because he made the bench and came on at the weekend. I wonder. I think they might stockpile in the top end in those attacking areas, because they've had the experience this season of being thinned out by 2 injuries that all of a sudden thin you out. And I think if they can carry them within the squad limit, which they should be able to, because Clarke crucially doesn't affect that issue at all, and doesn't change what Town can do there. I wonder whether they might stay. And
I think you're probably right. Experience has shown that it only takes 3-4 injuries to all happen at the same time, and the situation changes quite quickly. We might even see a bit of bench rotation going on just to try and keep people happy. Whether that's the right or the wrong thing to do, I don't know, but just to try and make everybody feel involved. And the bench might be completely different from Plymouth last weekend. We saw Edwards and Kane Vincent-Young come on. They might not even be on the bench this time around, and then back on the bench for the next game. It might be like that.
Yeah, I think that there's a different. We're talking about a Habme there, and then talking about Edwards. I think there's a difference in their position on the pitch, because it's kind of. I'd say there's kind of 3.5 players going into one central striking position in Ladapo. Hurst, Caden Jackson would be the half, because he's also used as out wide, and then a Habme. There's 3 strikers ahead of a Habme, I think, and that's not. And then you've also got people like Broadhead who can play up front as well. So I think a Habme has to go somewhere to play. Otherwise, he might get the odd scrap here and there, but not enough to sustain a young player who's trying to learn. But that 3 of attacking 3 position behind the one striker, that's where I think they'll keep their options, and just see where it takes them.
I know you said never say never, and you can't write off Ipswich making more signings in this game changer era. Where could you make an argument for more?
A wide position at the top end of the pitch, somebody that they think is a better option than Kyle Edwards, and then Kyle Edwards would move on loan. That would be, if I had to make an argument of where that might be, it might be that. But it's not an argument. I'm not bad. I don't think they need it, but
No.
I just wonder whether
it might be a bit like Clarke, that if the right opportunity arises, did they need Clarke right now? No, not necessarily. But he is as much a medium and long term investment as he is for this here and now of a promotion push. And you're right. Maybe if somebody else of that sort of age bracket and profile and ticks all the boxes, and we can do this now because we've got the financial muscle to do so, and we might be able to beat others to this player by doing it in January rather than waiting for more of a bun fight in the summer, then that's the sort of scenario where they might go for someone else. Where are we at with this squad limit? I should have checked before I came on. I remember it's a 22-man squad, and they had 2 free spots going into January, and then we talked about obviously being able to deregister both Ball and Kamara. So there was, I'm talking out loud here, there was 4 spots essentially to play with, and they've now filled Hurst, Broadhead, Luongo. So Clarke doesn't count. So there is still 1 space to work with.
They could be. Yeah, they could be. There's still,
So,
there's still
room for manoeuvre. Saying there's a chance.
I'm saying there's a chance. Yeah, they can obviously they can also add another Clarke aged player that doesn't factor into that whatsoever. So
yeah, I mean we've been waiting for the Man United loanee to rock up at some point, haven't we? We're getting towards the end of transfer window number 2 for Kieran McKenna. That was the obvious play for the former Manchester United youth team, the team manager. I see Shola Shortai has gone to Bolton. Is that right? In League One, we talked about him being a sort of number 10 option from United's under 23s. Charlie McNeil's been kind of half mentioned on the internet at various stages. His name's been chucked in with dozens of clubs. Again, if you did decide to let a Hadmi go and you wanted to just then have a kind of a third choice backup striker to Hurst and Ladapo, you could go and get an 18, 19-year-old from a Premier League club that doesn't affect the squad limit.
Yeah, there's also John Jules to factor in.
Yeah.
He's obviously a little way away still, several weeks, couple of months even away from playing again, but he's very much part of it, I think. There's no need for them to kind of terminate his loan. He's underage as well in terms of that squad slot system. So he's not any kind of barrier to them doing anything else. But he's also someone to factor in a few weeks, hopefully, that would make it even more difficult for Hadley to get a game. Crazy, really, isn't it, this?
I'm going to play a little game here. You're going to read out what you think, when everyone's fit and firing, the strongest 11 is. Do you want to give that a go?
Yep, I'm going to read it out, am I?
Yeah, go on, go.
Okay.
And I'll tick them off, and then I'll put together a second team with what's left.
Okay. Walton, Clarke, Wolfenden. I want it to be Edmondson. I want it to be Edmondson. I'm going to say Edmondson. That will need some work, but I want it to be Edmondson. Davis, obviously. Morsey, Evans, Burns, Chaplin, Broadhead, Hurst.
Okay. It's pretty much what I'd got written down, with the same question mark next to that left-sided centre half. So that leaves, this is a second string 11 now, of Hlacki in goal. Then you're going to have Donasian, Burgess, and Keogh is your back three. Are we calling it a back three?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you're putting Lee at left back, aren't you?
Lee at left back, Donasian at right back, Keogh and Burgess as centre halves. Luongo and Humphreys as your two central midfielders. You've got a choice between Caden Jackson or Kyle Edwards on the right. You've probably got Aluko as your number 10 and Harness as your inside left forward, and then Ladapo up front. And even then, so there's three people that have missed that second 11 there, which is Kane Vincent-Young. If we're going with Jackson on the right, Kyle Edwards misses out, and Ahadmi doesn't make the cut either. So we talked about three players in the danger zone. That's Vincent-Young, Edwards, and Ahadmi not making the second 11, as I've just read out. So that gives you an idea of strength and depth, and that's not even taking into account Dominic Ball, Panucci, Kamara, Tyrese, John Jules, the various players that are coming back from loan. Matt Penny, who is back in the building now and will be training with the Ipswich players. Piggott. It's a big old squad.
Well, there's still Raheem Harper drifting around it.
Idris El Mazouni, Baggett, and Darba.
Wow. It's a big squad, isn't it?
It is a big squad. So pressure's on Andy now, isn't it? They've left it all on the table. Which brings us on to the actual football. We've had time to reflect on the Plymouth result last weekend, the late disappointment. I'll be honest, when we did our podcast on Monday, reflecting on it, I'd watched back the first half and was maybe a little bit down on the performance. And then after we finished the podcast, I watched the second half and I felt a lot better about it, actually. I thought they got to grips. That first half was really frenetic. I thought they got to grips with the game a little bit more. I thought Plymouth's high-intensity press just dropped off a little bit. I thought after they scored, they were on top. And a really big key moment, which I probably didn't recognise at the time, was that injury, the head injury to Dan Scarr, which sort of took the wind out of Ipswich's sails. They were on top at that point, and it started making a bit bitty. And again, the Burns injury late on didn't help. They didn't do a huge amount wrong after going 1-0 up, I'll be honest. So I kind of felt a little bit better about it watching that back, that second half. We can't keep talking about freak goals going in and moments happening because they have stacked up. But it's put a bit of pressure on these next two games, hasn't it? Oxford away and Morecambe at home. 3 draws in a row. You can't afford to go too many more games without a win.
No, I'll be honest. I don't feel like a game at Oxford is the ideal one either. I don't know what it is about that place, but it doesn't go particularly well for Ipswich at Oxford. Like last season, we thought, and you can't put it all on kind of omens. It's not. It's all irrelevant, really. But it's just not the kind of place that I feel good about going to now. And that's even coming less than a month after they beat Oxford 3-0 at Portman Road. It's a tough one. This isn't an easy one by any stretch for Ipswich. I don't think.
We had six meetings between Ipswich and Oxford. following relegation, and three goals in there
until Boxing Day.
Until Boxing Day, a bunch of 0-0 draws. There was a 1-0 to Oxford, and then obviously that late heartbreak last season. Selina, absolute scenes in the away end. McNally then goes and scores a header at a corner, and that really, I think we knew that was the death of the late charge into the playoff dream, wasn't it, that day? Just took the wind out of Ipswich's sails. I wasn't there on Boxing Day. It was a rare game missed for me, but even though they ended up cruising to a 3-0 win, sounds like those first 15, 20 minutes were a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, Oxford did present a really good challenge. What Ipswich did a good job in this one is after getting the first goal, they stamped on Oxford after that and did a really good job of seeing it through. So in that sense, they did well. They managed the situation really well and came out of it with a really good win. But I think you're going to have to reset all of that, and it's going to be the same challenge that those opening 20 minutes will be. They're good at finding space, Oxford. They're good at moving the ball, and they've got some thrust in midfield as well. So it's going to be an early challenge to kind of get on top of it, which Ipswich want to do. We know that. We know they want to be on top of every game they're playing in, and they weren't able to do that in the Oxford game. Thankfully, they found a way, and it wasn't just the fact of getting that first goal through Ladapo kind of out of nowhere. It was building to that. They'd managed to work their way into it, and work their way on top of it. Heading into that goal. So they're going to have to work similarly hard in this one, if not harder, given that it's on Oxford's own turf.
I think Oxford were unbeaten in 10 going into that game, weren't they? They just got a draw against Sheffield Wednesday prior to coming to Portman Road. You look through their squad, there's a lot of championship experience in there. Matty Taylor up front, players that have been linked with big money moves higher up the chain, people like Cameron Brannigan. Their right back was playing for Lazio not that long ago. It's a decent squad on paper, and they're a team that have finished under Carl Robinson there or thereabouts, as they say, at the top end of this division for 3 seasons in a row, leading into this one.
Yeah, they have got some good players. I really like Brannigan. We talked about him a lot on this podcast over the years. I like him. I like Elliot Moore at the back. Yeah. Marcus McGuane, I've liked as well. I think he came off injured at the weekend. There's a bit of a doubt for the weekend, but I like McGuane as well. If he wasn't around, that would be good for Ipswich. But they're a good team, and I like Carl Robinson as well. They've got some interesting experienced players in there as well, like Yannick Wildschut in there as well, who I was, and one of the Murphys. I'll be honest, I can't remember which one it is. It's one of the Murphys. And his name begins with J. Is one of them. Probably the not so good one, but I like him as well. So Billy Bowden, they've got some good players. They're a good team, and they can pose questions. They like to pose questions. So Town aren't going to have this easy.
No, they've. As I say, they were 10 unbeaten going into that Ipswich game. They've won a couple of games since, beat Charlton. They beat Fleetwood last weekend. Carl Robinson talked about them being the worst team, and maybe we're a little fortunate to get the win. But, it was the old cliche of still managed to find a way to win when we weren't at our best. So I know he's sort of aired some frustrations at his inability to add in the transfer market so far. He wants to strengthen at the top end of the pitch. Don't know if we can read too much into this, but talked about sometimes there's not a lot you can do. We've lost out to players that have either wanted to go to the Premier League, the Championship, or have even gone to teams in our own division for millions of pounds. So I would imagine there's only one club he might be referring to there. So whether they were interested in any of the players that have come Ipswich's way, I don't know. But yeah, it feels like every game feels important now, doesn't it, Andy? We're into the last 20. There's a 7-point gap to make up on Plymouth. You looked at it last weekend. Do you think it's the difference between it becoming a a 4-point swing or a 10-point swing. It ended up staying at 7, but that's the kind of margins that can turn on any given weekend. And Sheffield Wednesday are at home to Cheltenham. I think. Oh no, that's Plymouth. Plymouth are at home to Cheltenham, aren't they? And Sheffield Wednesday are at home as well. So yeah. Earlier in the season, you'd maybe go a point away at Oxford wouldn't be the end of the world, but it's starting to feel like points are not good enough at the moment. Draws are adding up.
Well, Kieran McKenna, and Kieran's right. He said this a lot over the last year or so, that draws ultimately at the end of the season don't get you very far. You can draw 3 games in a row, which Ipswich have done, or you can win 1 and lose 2, and you've got the same outlay there. But you've remained unbeaten, which is almost irrelevant by that point. So I think they really need to win this, don't they? You would back Wednesday and Plymouth to win their home games this weekend, and Ipswich need to win to hold on to where they were. That's where it is. As usual, it doesn't end their season if they don't win this game. It doesn't define anything, but it's starting to.
I think people have maybe overplayed this feeling that Plymouth and Sheffield Wednesday won't slip up and they're winning machines and we've got to keep pace with them. They may well win again this weekend looking at their fixtures, but 3 wins in 10 is what Ipswich have done in the league now, which isn't good enough for an automatic promotion chasing team. It's not good form. But if you look back through Sheffield Wednesday and Plymouth's fixtures, they've not quite had a 10-game run as bad as that in terms of points, but they've not been far off it. Plymouth have had some sticky patches. Sheffield Wednesday have had 2. They drew 3 games in a row at one stage. And I'm sure they will again at some stage, looking at the fixtures. So hopefully, we keep saying it, Ipswich have had their kind of sticky patch, and it has coincided, let's not forget, with quite a lot of injuries around that November-December period. You hope now that these new signings are going to make a difference, and the players that have come back from injuries are really getting back towards sort of 100%, and they can get that really powerful momentum, a bit of snowball momentum going. I think it's going to require a spell at some stage where they win 3, 4, 5 games in a row and build something.
Well, this would be quite a nice place to start, wouldn't it? Going into a home game with Morecambe on Tuesday night, and then sort of the freeing of the shackles that comes with a chance to play Premier League elect Championship leaders Burnley. That would be quite a nice way to start. Right, big question before we wrap things up, Stu. Are they gonna do it? Do you think they're gonna win this weekend? Because I do.
Yes, I do.
Do you know what else I think? I think a new boy is going to score a goal.
Which one?
Harry Clarke.
Do you?
Well, no, but yeah, I do. He's done it before. I think he scored on his home. I want to say he scored on his home debut for Ross County. I think
scored a couple for Stoke towards the start of this season, didn't he?
Yep, scored on his Hibs debut as well. He's got a little bit of a history.
Okay, Ipswich are getting a few goals from set pieces as well. Is that where it comes from?
No. It's he's going to get a whiff.
I feel a bit sad for Genoy. Do you know what also made me feel sad is when I saw Harry Clarke post a load of pictures saying goodbye to Arsenal when he does the Genoy Wes Burns handshake with somebody. And if he goes and gets a whiff, that would really rub salt in the wounds of Genoy. If he did an actual goal.
I'll always have Genoy's back. If he starts doing that handshake with Wes Burns, though, that's a bad sign.
I don't think Wes would do it.
He can do it with his Arsenal mates. It's fine. But not with Wes. And you're right, Wes wouldn't do it either.
It just means that there's time for another Denaissance. You have different Denaissance eras, don't you? And
he's had about 4.
He's had about 4, so maybe there'll be another one further down the track. We'll see.
I'm going to say 2-1 Ipswich with Harry Clarke scoring a goal.
We haven't done the team. Do you think Hurst and or Broadhead will start this match?
I think Hurst will start. I think Broadhead will come off the bench.
Okay.
That's what I think with the structure of everything else we've just said. I think Donatian will start this game. I think Clarke will come on. I think Hurst will start this game, and I think Broadhead will come on as well in the second half.
Yeah, I think you're right about Hurst as well. I think they'll just throw caution to the wind and just get. He's got the only way he's going to get his match sharpness is by playing. Fair enough. Don't chuck him straight into the Plymouth game last weekend, but I think they'll take a calculated risk and see him as a bit of a wild card in a game that really they need to go and win. So, yeah, looking forward to seeing some more of him. Looking forward to seeing the first glimpses of Broadhead and Clarke, and hopefully this can be the spark that gets Ipswich going. And we want them really motoring going into that Sheffield Wednesday game at Portman Road in February, don't we?
We sure do. That sounds like a good place to leave things, Stu. Before we go, big shout out to our sponsors, Manscaped, and in particular to Ginger Pickle. Very big on Google ads, Ginger Pickle at the moment. I'm led to believe, a little birdie tells me that some podcast listeners have begun to reach out to Ginger Pickle for some help. And that is exactly the name of the game. He's the man to help. Tony Southgate, Ginger Pickle, Google stuff. And if you want your pickle, what does Mike say? If you want your pickle,
Ginger,
Google
Ginger Pickle.
Google Ginger Pickle. Easy, makes sense. Here's the 3 points at the weekend, and hopefully we can talk about that on Monday.